Praise be to Allah, we seek His help, we seek His forgiveness. Whoever Allah guides will never be led astray, and whoever Allah leads astray, no one can guide. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, alone without any partners. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammad abduhu wa rasuluhu. I bear witness that Muhammad is His servant and His messenger. We hear the name Bukhari many times when we mention hadith. And, some people don't know who Bukhari. So who is Bukhari? And what is Sahih al-Bukhari that I keep quoting when I say hadith? When we hear Bukhari, we're talking about Imam Al-Bukhari. And his real name is not Bukhari. His real name is Muhammad ibn Ismail ibn Ibrahim al-Bukhari. He was born in a city called Bukhara. And that's where he gets his name, Bukhari, from. Bukhara is a city where back then it was called Khurasan, which is modern day Iran, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan area. Bukhari's father, Ismail, he studied hadith under Imam Malik, famous scholar. And Bukhari's great-grandfather was the first in his lineage to accept Islam. Unfortunately, Bukhari's dad died when he was an infant. And his mother is the one who raised him a portion of his life. But Bukhari's father, he left a good sum amount of money, so they didn't have to, worry about money. They lived a comfortable life. Bukhari started studying hadith at a young age. And by the time he was 14 and 15 years old, around that time, he had taken all the hadiths in the city of Bukhara. And city of Bukhara, had a lot of scholars in there. And he took all the hadith in the city. And at the age of 16, Bukhari, his mother, and his older brother went to perform Hajj. And he went to perform Hajj in Mecca. And Mecca at the time was considered to be the international Islamic university, where all the scholars and all the shuyukh went, and they were narrating hadith, they were narrating fiqh, aqidah, and other things. And everywhere you go, you'll always find a halaqah or a lecture going on. And when Imam Bukhari sees this, he sees all the halaqat and all the lectures and all the scholars, he's amazed. This is his dream come true. And when Hajj is over, he tells his mom and his brother that he doesn't want to go with them. He wants to stay in Mecca to learn further his education in hadith. So Bukhari, began to study in Mecca and in Medina. And at the age of 18, he wrote his first book. And his first book, if you look at it nowadays, it's 9 thick volumes. And it's about one of the most advanced topics in Islam, and this is Ilm al-Rijal, and which means the science of men. And it is literally a biography on the dictionary of thousands of people from the time of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to the time of Bukhari. And to this day, you still have people using it as a primary source. Around the age of 20, Bukhari was traveling from here to there, and he traveled to Baghdad. And he studied under the greatest scholar in that time, which is Imam Ahmad ibn Hammoudeh. And Imam Ahmad told the people that Imam Al-Bukhari was he had never seen anybody like this from the province of Khurasan. And Khurasan at that time was one of the largest provinces at the time. And the only reason he just said Khurasan because Bukhari was only 20 years old. So you couldn't say, too much because he was only 20 years old, even though he had a lot of knowledge and he had a lot of things, you couldn't really say anything other than that. Well, if Imam Ahmad would have met him later on in Bukhari's life, he would have said, this is one of the best individuals he ever met. Imam Al-Bukhari has what we now call a photographic memory. He only needed to see a hadith once for him to become memorized in his head. And he never needed to use his notes again. And Bukhari's, people were talking about his photographic memory. And they were saying that it was so strong that even the scholars couldn't believe it. So at the age of 30, around 30, and this was when Bukhari was well known. And at that time, to be well known at the age of 30 was unique. Information was traveled through conversation. There was no Facebook or news or anything like that. So at the age of 30, for him to be well known was something unique. So the scholars, they wanted to test Bukhari. So what they did, here and there, the shuyukh will always, the scholars will always give a halaqah, which each one will give, 10, 15 hadith, and to give it to the students. So this time, they invited thousands of people like usual, and everyone was in a big halaqah. And each scholar, there was 10 scholars, they were each going to give 10 hadith. And usually, they would tell the 10 hadith, the students will learn from it, the students will benefit from it. But this time, the scholars want to see if Bukhari was really what he says he is. So what they did was they grabbed hadith, they were going to pick 10 hadiths, and they changed the isnad of the hadith. The isnad is the chain of narrators. So you'll say, this person said this person said this person, that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said this. So when we look at hadith, the normal people look at the hadith, we just look at the matan, the actual hadith, the actual text. But to the scholars and the people of knowledge, they look at the isnad, the chain. So they want to see if Bukhari, because he says he's a scholar, the people say he's a scholar, they want to see, okay, is he really a scholar? Is he really going to notice the little change in the isnad that we are going to do? So the scholars started. So the first scholar, everyone is looking at this, thousands people. The first scholar says his first hadith, and the first hadith was something very common. Something that everybody knows, something, very famous hadith. But he changed the isnad a little bit. He changed the chain of narrators a little bit. And everyone, oh yeah, I know this hadith, they, and then the scholar asked Bukhari, because back then when you change the isnad and the matan of the hadith, it's considered a whole different hadith. So you can have the right matan, but if you have the wrong isnad, the wrong chain of narrators, then it's a completely different hadith. So when the scholar, he said the hadith, and he said it with a different isnad, a different chain, he asked Bukhari, do you know this hadith? Do you have this hadith in your book? Bukhari said, no, I don't have this hadith. So everyone was shocked. They were like, what? This is a famous hadith. How doesn't Bukhari have it? So, the scholar did number 2. Hadith number 2. And again, it was another famous hadith, except he changed the isnad a little bit, and he asked Bukhari, do you know this hadith? No, he said. Then he continued with the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, and then the next scholar, his first, his second. And so they made it to all 100 hadith. Each one, they changed the isnad a little bit, and they asked Bukhari, do you have it? Every single one, he said, no, I don't have this hadith. So again, everyone was surprised. Oh, how does Bukhari not know these? These are one of the most well-known hadiths. So at the end, before they finished, Bukhari asked them, are you guys finished now with your hadith? They said yes. So he went on the stage. He went in front of everybody. He said, you, first scholar, the first hadith you said was this, that, with the isnad of A, B, C, D, when in fact it's E, F, G. You're wrong. So he did this with every single first, second, third hadith. To the 100th, he corrected each single one. And this is not what amazed, the students. They knew that, Bukhari knew all the hadith and all the isnad. This is not what really surprised them. What really surprised them is that Bukhari memorized all 100 incorrect hadiths after listening to it one time, and he corrected each one in order that they were presented to him. Each one he corrected one by one. Bukhari never used the book, even when he was correcting, and even in his lifetime. He never used the book, always from the top of his head. So the only book on this world that's more authentic than the book of Bukhari, Sahih al-Bukhari, is the Quran, and is written by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the work and effort Bukhari put into this book, is unbelievable. Bukhari used to travel days, he used to travel deserts, he used to cross countries for every single hadith he has in his book. And Bukhari took 16 years to complete this book. 16 years. And in this book are just over 7,000 hadiths. And Bukhari decided to put these 7,000 out of the over 500,000 hadiths that he had memorized in his head. And he chose these 7,000 because, he had no doubt that these were authentic. And before Bukhari wrote every single one of these 7,000 hadiths, he would pray, he would make fresh wudu, and he would pray 2 rak'ah before writing every single hadith in his book. And Bukhari, this is just, one of his many accomplishments. Especially Sahih al-Bukhari was one of his top accomplishments, but he has also a lot of others. So brothers and sisters, the reason of me telling you about Bukhari is because, we have the books of Bukhari. Everywhere you go, whether a library, and you even have them online for free. And the time and effort that he put into it, is unbelievable. And he didn't do it for me and you. He did it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah knows best what he did it for. But inshallah, Allah rewards him for that. But we have these things at our disposal and we're not using them. We don't even know who Bukhari is. Some people thought Bukhari, that's his name. So read his book, read Sahih al-Bukhari, learn about his life, because what I said, it does not even scratch the surface of his life and his journey and how he did to become what he is today.